We're in the thick of earnings season, and an emerging theme, the eye-watering numbers that big tech is anticipating to spend in 2025. The latest name from the Magnificent Seven, Alphabet, reporting that it is expanding its capital expenditures for the year to $75 billion. For more, we're bringing in Futurum CEO Daniel Newman. The numbers are big, the increases are big, and there doesn't seem to be any appetite to slow any of this down.
Fear not DeepSeek is what I would say.
Yeah.
We heard that come out and everyone's like, it's the end. And I think the people that are really in the know realize it's the beginning. That's why none of the forecasts, whether it's been Meta, whether it's been Microsoft, whether it's been Alphabet, all of them have really stood by their expectations to invest. It's because we are entering era 2. We went from this pre-training era where there was this one big infrastructure buy that this is what everyone could understand. Now we're entering the inference era, and these companies have to build out the capacity to do trillions of concurrent tokens for these workloads. And this pivot is big, and these companies don't want to fall behind.
Let me ask you, what did you make of one thesis out there, which was that if we're going to have cheaper or open source models, that means, okay, app makers, software firms, it's going to be that much easier for them to make these AI apps, right? You're going to see a proliferation of those, and that is good news for an Apple, for example. What do you make of that argument?
The consumption is the real theory here. I mean, look, we've been waiting all year for this AI ROI story. And so we have to move from infrastructures to platforms and applications. That's kind of the way things flow. What we got out of this whole story was it's going to happen faster. I mean, look, there's a lot to unpack with DeepSeek. There's still a lot of question marks. Was it half a billion? Was it $1.5 billion they spent? It wasn't 6 million. Okay, that we know for sure. But having said that, what we do know is that there's this massive desire. So you've heard companies like Qualcomm and ARM both reporting today kind of come out. They're very enthusiastic about it. Why? Because if we find cheaper inference and more of it, people are going to want to do it on device. That's good for handsets. That's good for PCs. App makers, Mark Benioff was thrilled. You saw some of the tweets that he put out about it. That's because if we have more agents and this becomes more affordable, it costs them less to build it. They can pass it on to consumers, and consumers can go from, about 98% of companies are doing some type of POC for AI, but only 25% has scaled it.
POC?
Proof of concept. Sorry about that. And the bottom line is that none of this is, I would estimate we're at about 1% deployment of the potential of AI. I mean, we have hundreds, if not thousands of times orders of magnitude more AI to do. We're just in the beginning. This CapEx build out has to continue, and that's why all the NVIDIA fear, I just don't buy it.
Okay, so here's a question I have for you. We have a chart looking at the CapEx percentage increases that are planned for this year, either that companies have told us or that are estimated. That's clearly the white line there. The green, though, is the expected revenue growth this year for these companies, which is in the teens. But guess what? If you look at next year, it's in the teens. If you look at the year after that, it's in the teens. Where is the return on this investment?
I love it. I love the enthusiasm. Look, I feel the exact same way. I've been putting the question mark out there about AI ROI. We've got to get to these applications that people can consume. It's consumption. Look at this Apple moment. Hasn't happened yet. This AI PC moment hasn't happened yet. There's excitement. It's oh great, I can run a model locally, right? That's what we were just talking about. But where does money get made? So if you think about an agent, right? And people talk a lot about agent force. I'll just use that example, right? Or Copilot, both of those things. Every time someone pushes that button, there's an opportunity to monetize. Right now, it's very little. We're hearing very little. Microsoft spending $80 billion to make 13. But companies are doing this, hundreds of times, thousands of times. They've deployed it to 1%, 5% of their workforce. If they can get this deployed to 50% of their workforce and then get those pennies per action at scale, that's where I see it happening. It has to be consumed in the applications.
Isn't the real opportunity, though, is not in the enterprise? There's only so much you can do, and then doesn't it have to be consumer at some point to really unlock the value for this thing? And I don't know.
Yeah, there's different business models. Actually, that's a great pivot. So you look at Google and Alphabet, why it's under fire right now. I mean, it's got a whole bunch of antitrust things, but I think most people in the world are asking the question is, does search look like search in a few years? I think all of us that are using an OpenAI tool, that maybe they're using Gemini, you're how do they integrate this? Do people stay on the platform? Does the Apple install base and the built-in Android install base turn to money? The advertising model has to change. I think there's an attribution model, and I think if people are doing billions of searches, and it's creating pennies, nickels, dimes. But I think this is a scale play. I think a lot of people, to your point, I do think there's money to be made in enterprise. There's always a lot of profit in enterprise. Having said that, adoption hasn't happened yet. That goes back to the AI PC, back to the iPhone. We need the adoption, then they come. That's how the App Store worked. It wasn't always such a boon for Apple, but now it is. It's the biggest lock-in, it's the biggest moat, and that's why nobody's selling, or a little bit of selling of Apple, because they know long-term, Apple doesn't have to get AI right away. They've got the install base, and as long as they got the install base, they'll turn it to money.
Pushing ahead a little bit. So
Yeah.
Alphabet is getting nailed today, right?
Yeah.
It's mixed results. It was actually solid search, but cloud softness. Do you see that, Dan, and is that a yellow flag to you for Amazon's report tomorrow after the close in their cloud business?
Yeah, we saw with Microsoft, then we saw it with Alphabet, and it goes back to our point about AI ROI. Yeah. People are like, they're spending all this CapEx, they're growing at 30%, but they were growing at 30% before we were talking about AI. I think there is a worry there. I think them figuring out how to turn these platforms, build these applications, and monetize. You were absolutely right, Julie, about the whole thing. It's just, I think it's gonna happen faster. I think everyone's a little bit more conservative in their forecasting, and rightfully so. There's no benefit for most of these CEOs to forecast ahead of what they know for sure. They can always hold back a little bit and get more aggressive. I think we're seeing a moment, we're seeing AI move to the edge, we're seeing consumption grow. I'm very bullish about it, but just like you both, I want to see the proof too, in order for me to start believing that this pivot is actually being made.
Well, we'll keep waiting until we get it. All right, thanks, Dan. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Good to see you.